Hey, welcome to the No Guts, No Game podcast. This podcast is dedicated to help you navigate the journey of buying a Sandler franchise. So whether you've just started the investigation or you're knee deep into the decision process, we've got you covered. Hi, I'm Dave Mattson, Executive Chairman and President of Franchising here at Sandler. In each episode, I'm interviewing a Sandler franchisee who is in your shoes. Now, maybe they were investigating 2 years ago or 2 months ago, but they're gonna share their experiences, their insights, the questions that they had when they were sitting in your chair. The goal of the podcast is to provide you valuable information and firsthand accounts from their perspective that will help you in your decision-making process for you and your family. So sit back, relax, and get ready to hear from those who have already jumped into entrepreneurship with a Sandler franchise. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on the No Guts, No Game podcast. Today, we've got Cal Thomas with us, who has been part of the network for a while now, and then actually a franchise owner for the last, how many years now?
A little more than 6, Dave.
6 years. So Cal, maybe we'll start off. I know our topic today is how important is culture as you're looking for your next career stop. But before we get there, why don't you just tell everybody, because this is designed for people who are 6 years behind you, trying to figure out, is this the business that I'd like to be in? Should I stay where I am? Should I go do something else? Is Sandler it for me? But tell a little bit about your background and how you found us.
Yeah, well, I found Sandler very much by accident. And as Dave, my career started in purchasing and materials management. I was one of those buyer guys. So I didn't even like salespeople, let alone think I'd be helping them, do a better job.
You went to the dark side. You came to the dark side.
My old friends, they still can't believe it. But we met some really terrible salespeople, but I also met some really great ones. And I was at a great corporate culture, but I'm kind of a restless guy. And one day I woke up and said, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. Good luck. I don't think they noticed much, but I came from a corporate environment, and then I started a consulting practice, and then I went to a baseball game, Dave, now I know was called a networking event, and met a guy who asked me a lot of questions like Sandler people do. Next thing I know, I'm a Sandler trainer. It's a little longer story, but.
So you actually joined as a associate?
Yeah, what we called associates. It seemed I went in to visit and I thought, from my old background, this just makes so much sense. And I was immediately at ease and I was comfortable with the approach that he was describing that real good salespeople should take. So it really resonated with me.
Made it easy. So when we're talking about culture, culture in general is one of these things everybody talks about. Everybody's searching for the optimal culture in their world, especially if you're at your last career stop and you want to make sure that you're right, make the right move depending on the opportunity. And it's just the company that I'd like to make sure I spend the next X amount of years with. But if I go back in time, you came from an awesome culture. You mentioned that in the opening. But how important was culture, if at all, when you were starting to look for something that you wanted to do on your own? Now, when you said you left, were you looking for, I'm going to just go take another job, or you decided?
No, I just decided one morning that I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore. And that was it. I had no plan. My plan was to move back across the country to where I was from. That's about as far as my plan got.
Okay. So you just knew you were unhappy with where you were. If you were going to do something, now's the time. And it sounds like you're a burn the boats type guy. So you just said, that's it. I've decided. I don't know where I'm doing. Don't know where I'm going, but this is it. I'm not going to stay here any longer. I'd like to go do something else, which is very cool. So culture, how important was it when you first were investigating? What did you want to do next? Was it like on your top list as you really start to think about it now? I mean, now I'm sure it's different, but when you go back 6+ years, like where were you in your mind as far as the importance of culture?
I didn't give it a second thought. I didn't know really. We talked a lot at the company I was with about culture. We taught culture, but that's just what it was. I didn't really internalize it. Dave, I just wanted to be out and be, quote, on my own. But what I didn't, it took me a little while to realize this. I didn't like being on my own all by myself. It sounds like a great idea, but there's no support structure. There's no IT guy. Well, there's no one to collaborate with. And as I investigated a lot of those things, one of my top three things is collaboration and with smart people. And I was missing that.
So you had made a decision, it was time. I always find culture is one of these things where people, it's interesting. You first hear it when people say, I'm in a terrible culture.
Right.
But I don't think if it's status quo, if it's okay, most people don't talk about it. If it's super awesome, I mean, they will talk about it. But in general, you typically hear about it when it's just horrific. And so you wanted collaboration. You wanted to be together with others, like-minded, right? But at the same time, you wanted the independence of owning a business, but yet some sort of connectivity with others. And again, that's just about as far as it seems like you had thought that particular topic through. Is that about right?
That's a good summary. Yep.
So what was on the top list, if you think about it? I mean, I can guess for you because, obviously I've talked to lots of people looking to open a business, but what was on your top 2 or 3 that you were looking for at the time?
Well, I was doing quote management consulting at the time, helping people solve problems and to get better at what they were doing.
Okay.
What I didn't know what I was doing is I was helping their interpersonal and their communication skills, because I actually had done that back in my corporate job. I was a peer trainer. And that's what I thought I wanted to do, is go into a training kind of business. And then I thought maybe I wanted to go into a sales kind of business because I'd never done sales and it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, I met Kevin 10 plus years ago, and he said, you're not going to believe me, I own a sales training company.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I didn't realize, I was helping some of those companies create some culture, because they were mostly solopreneurs doing their own manufacturing or engineering. And little places, they didn't have much of a culture, or it was a work until you can't stop working. You have to stop working culture. And that wasn't very healthy.
So they didn't have a sales culture, as you found.
Certainly didn't have a sales culture.
So let's then talk about how this works, because I think what this culture to me, if we just kind of break it down, and I'd love your thoughts now that you've been here for a while, now that you're in the Sandler ecosystem, have had an opportunity to see how Sandler Corporate interacts with franchisees like yourself, how franchisees interact with each other, which to me would be the second, and then really how you interact with your client base, because to me, it's all connected, right? I mean, if you really think about it, we all try to lead by example. So I think it would be helpful now as you reflect back. It's not like you've been here for 25 years, 6 years, you still remember the beginning, what it was. And you certainly can see what's been going on in the network. Maybe help those who are looking at a Sandler franchise. Talk a little bit about the culture between home office and the field. And then really the culture, which I think is so amazing, between franchisees as far as support and sharing businesses and mentoring and openness and all the stuff that I take for granted these days. And then really how that trickles down to how you support your own clients.
Yeah, I'm going to start with number 2, Dave.
Okay.
I remember it was right about 10 years ago. It was in the fall, and we went to Long Island and had a Sandler regional conference. So all the people in the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast region got together. And I've never been a real shy guy or really intimidated. I walked into that room, and Rich and Rob and I thought I was in the wrong
there for a long time, right? New Sandler, Obi-Wan Kenobis.
Unbelievable in the level of conversation. And, I'd been around maybe 6 months, and I'm like, am I really supposed to be here? I had some major imposter syndrome. But they were the most helpful people. And I probably wasn't selling very well. I probably wasn't training all that great in the very, very beginning. And I remember Rob had said one thing. He said, the worst performance you give is the best one they've ever seen, largely because of the material. And if you can string a few sentences together, give me a call the next week and let me tell you why that is.
Yeah. I'll tell you, this concept of pay forward, which is, hey, help those that need help now. And then hopefully you'll be doing the same thing. I think when I worked with David Sandler, the amount of support that franchisees would give each other was shocking when you first came into the business, because you're coming from a corporate environment where everybody's trying to shine. Everybody wants to be the top in the company. So I'll help you, but not at my detriment, right? And it wasn't selfless. It was really, I'll help, but to a certain extent. When they come here, it's just amazing how all that disappears because we don't have to compete. See, I'm not competing for jobs. I'm not competing for income. Even if I'm in the same environment, there are so many prospects. The openness by which you're describing is amazing to me. And I love your insights about how the field helps each other, but even some examples, because, you know, at this point in time, I just, after 38 years, I take it for granted, but I know it's very special.
Oh, yeah. Three in particular, right after that first call, I was invited to go sit in. That's when we were actually sitting down, training, seeing people eyeball to eyeball. But I only knew one style of training, and that was from the franchise I was in. Mm-hmm. So I probably went to 4 different other franchises and watched what they did and how they did it and how they delivered it. And I thought, wow, it was so great for me to pick up some other ways of doing things from people who had been around for 10 or 20 or some of them 30 years. So that was really eye-opening. Number 2 was, I'd say, an accountability group. And within Sandler, I've been in a couple of different accountability groups. I'm not the best at sales behaviors. Don't tell anybody that. But I know that once a month when I show up with that accountability group, there is no way I'm going to show up and say, oh, I got too busy, or something happened and I didn't make the calls, or I didn't do my care model. There's no way I'm going to show up in front of that peer group and look like a monkey. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. I'll tell you, there's a couple things that go on. One is I think that if you think about the franchisees as you're describing, what pops into my mind is they'll do everything possible to make sure that our clients have a great experience. And the brand is super important to them. So if you really think about it, we're brand new, right? We want to be super successful. Our egos are on the line to a certain extent. We've got our whole family waiting for us to go and produce because this is a new venture for them and us. And then you've got where they're going to help you really navigate within the Sandler network. They'll help you with your training. They'll help you with selling. They'll help you on how to set the business up. Here are the talk tracks. Here's this, here's that. And really it's overwhelming in the beginning, honestly, because you're like, why, how does this not happen everywhere? But it is very unique here. And I think it's really accelerates the learning curve of the newer franchisees, because if you've got everyone that's been 5 to 10 years, 15 years ahead of you, really pulling you along, right? Helping you, giving you their examples so you don't have to learn by the road of hard knocks for a second. And they take you up to where they are today. And then I think the beautiful thing is that pay forward thing. Like, I'm sure that you do the same thing now to others when people helped you the same way, because I know that you're very, very, active in the regional meetings to that extent. So you play a large role in the regionals, and you're in the accountability groups. And I would suspect, I mean, you can tell me, but I suspect you're doing the exact same thing for others who are behind you than people did for you when you were coming up through the ranks.
There are a few things I do. And I remember when I called my coach, my Sandler coach, John, the first time I said, somebody just called me and had seen a talk that I did and asked me to help them through it. And I thought, wow, I actually have something to give back to them to help them. So I've gotten so much from so many people. So now I get to do it. I do a couple of talks when new people are coming in about what are the things to focus on, right? Not get creative. Don't go make stuff up. There's so much great stuff here. Just focus on it, right? Prospect, sell, and train. Training is fun, but we can't train if we don't prospect and we don't sell and we have no one to train, which actually became fun. I've learned some of that. The others, or at least I talk to probably at least 4 Sandler people every week, Dave.
All right.
3 or 4 for sure. And there are 2 that we have once a month, an actual scheduled call. We don't know what we're going to talk about, but boy, we come up and pass some information back and forth to each other.
Would you say connected? Well, being an entrepreneur is a lonely business, right? I mean, in fairness, you can't tell employees how difficult it is. Nobody in your family wants you to talk about how difficult it is. They want to know everything is awesome, and this was the best decision everybody made. And so you're almost carrying the weight of owning a business on your own. I call it entrepreneurial horror, right? And so, if I wake up sweating in the middle of the night, my wife's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "It's nothing." I can't say, "Hey, I've got like so much stuff going on. I'm just freaked out. I got all this stuff happening." It doesn't, no one really cares. They care, but you really can't share as an entrepreneur. It's just hard. So the fact that you have this support group of people that are in the same situation, some ahead of you, so they're pulling you along with some advice, some behind you, right? And there's so many people with different expertise in the field. It's awesome. Like when you have, hey, I'd love to figure out how do I work with engineers? Well, you've got a whole section over here that knows this industry or knows that particular persona, or vice versa. So there's a lot of different ways that we can pull information out of the field. But you said something else as well, which is just helping each other. So we've got conferences at Sandler that happen. You've got weekly and monthly virtual sessions that happen here at Sandler Corporate into the field. They're topic driven. You can decide. You mentioned the regionals. We've got the regionals. You mentioned a coach. So there's a coach assigned to you as well. And then you've got these accountability groups, which are franchisees potting together to keep each other accountable for activities and behaviors and results. They really become each other's sales managers. And Dr. Phil, like, hey, I don't know why I'm having a difficult time doing this. I just really am. But the ability to feel safe as you start to just explain what's going on to other trainers, other people who are entrepreneurs, that safe environment, I just think it helps us grow and it helps us accelerate what we're doing. And I'd like to think and love to have some examples from you, that's between franchisee to franchisee. So when you first came into the business, not knowing what to expect, to be honest, what did you sense or what did you feel or experience between the Sandler corporate group and you as a new franchisee?
Yeah, and when I first started 10 plus years ago, I didn't have much interaction because I didn't know.
You were a salesperson, right? Yeah, you were working with your franchisee, right?
Yep.
That was the center of your universe actually back then. So
Pretty
now you're in the business on your own, and now what happens?
Yeah, so wait, there's a bunch of these 410 phone numbers for this place called home office.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about some of these tools because there's so many different things that we can do through Sandler, right? The assessments and the different curriculum, and I want to try this. So I called some people at home office who I didn't really know knew existed at the time, and they said, "Well, of course, I will send you this," or "Here's where to find that," or "By the way, this guy in California has been teaching that No Guts, No Gain program," as this is aptly called. Talk to them, and he'll talk you through different ways to slice it and dice it. Because I had a client who wanted to do that program, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And the guy in California just walked me through it. He said, "It's pretty simple. Do it this way. This is the way I've done it." So I didn't need to get creative. I didn't need to make it up myself, which is what I didn't want to do. That's part of being in this business. I don't want to go create content. That's not my thing.
Right.
It really isn't. So the home office for me has been invaluable, and I think that has gotten much better over the last, I'd say, especially 3 years, maybe 4. Obviously, there's a lot more interaction with you, Dave, when you come to the regionals. You're very transparent, and we know what's going on, and we know what's coming up. We know what else is coming up. So it's not, oh, by the way, we're rolling out these programs on Thursday.
Yeah,
you need to go 3 hours prepping for a new class. Like, no, I got 6 months to do this and to integrate it into my business. And I have time to watch how other franchisees are rolling it into their business and talk to them about it. So I have a friend who he's a franchisor actually. And we've talked a lot about that. And he's been very guilty of dumping new stuff. By the way, by the end of this month, you need to be on the new system. I was like, boy, that's a little rough. Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So he's learning from us a little bit too.
Yeah.
And they will be a client, by the way, all the new franchisees.
There you go.
So yeah, there's a whole level of stuff I'm not good at, administrative things, creating tools. I'll never do it, but they're just there, and all I have to do is ask someone where to find them and reach out and get them.
Do you think that the culture cascading down from Sandler corporate to franchisee then cascades down to how you treat your clients?
I was thinking about that on an earlier question you asked. It does. So as us sometimes, right, we wake up in the middle of the night, our spouse doesn't want to hear it, we're a little bit alone, but we have this network to reach out to. I have a CEO group, which is it's the Sandler Management Program. And they asked me 6 years ago, Cal, I think you're great. I thought, oh, here it comes. But I think we learn a lot from each other in addition to the Sandler content. Can we shift that? So we now have a monthly, almost 3-hour CEO forum where they talk to each other because it's lonely at the top. And they force me to tell my victories and some of my stories too. So I'm almost part of the group, not quite. I facilitate. But so I give examples all the time, and maybe my clients are tired of hearing it, but maybe not. They're still with us. Is here are some things that we do internally. Would that be helpful? Mm-hmm. So it absolutely translates. And have you reached out to some other peers? Have you talked to someone in the business who's been doing this longer than you and asked them? So absolutely translate. I hadn't really thought of that.
I'm going to switch gears on you and take you down a rabbit hole for a second, but let me put this topic into a bucket here for a second. I think it's fair to say that anyone's listening or watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, most people are not going to put culture in the top 3 or 4 things they're looking at. They're going to say, does this inspire me? Do I get energized by this topic, Sandler, coaching, training, working with other business people? Do I want to be a business owner? Can I actually make the living I want to make? Is it proven? How much control, do they have? Like, what's the flexibility? What are the processes? What are the lanes that I'm supposed to stay in? Can I live with the rules? What's my territory? All that stuff. But I also think you would hear in your due diligence if the culture was horrific. But when you don't hear anything, you don't put much value on it. It's just how this works. But now, as you can see from Cal being in it for 6 years, and quite frankly, he was shielded from the culture in a way because he was working for a franchisee. So whatever the franchisee's culture was and their business is really what Cal was, exposed to. And then he becomes a franchisee. And then you see there's this whole thing going on that really is driven to do a couple things. One is to put the brand in the best possible light, right? Because we are the brand, to help fellow entrepreneurs. Because at the end of the day, it's lonely. We want to have the support, but we also want the independence, right? It's geared towards accelerating that growth. It's geared towards honest feedback, like just brutal, honest feedback, and giving examples, giving up your time. I have to tell you how humbled it was for me to watch during COVID, where some of the franchisees were not capable of doing remote training. They just weren't ready yet. And overnight, they had to be ready. And all the franchisees that are in our system that were already doing remote, and not 100% of the time, they're just dabbling, they become experts overnight and offered to train all of the rest of the franchisees' clients for free until they got the technology and their footing underneath them so they could do it on their own. They didn't have to do that. There was no money shared. It was awesome. But there's a million examples of these things.
Oh, and I think that is critical. But also those same people did webinars and what we're doing to teach all of the other franchisees who are struggling how to do it, what tools to use, what kind of cameras, all of those things, making recommendations, loaning equipment. And that was awesome. Cool thing. Yep.
So I would just say, as you're looking around other businesses, you should pay attention to what that culture is, because once you get past the initial ramp of can I make business, do I love it, then you're left with what the culture is. And that probably should be in your top 2 or 3. It's not going to be, but once you're in it, it becomes on the top 2 or 3 for you to stay, because anyone that is an entrepreneur has the mindset of I can do this anywhere. I just choose to be at Sandler. See, we only have a 60-day or a 6-month out clause. You can leave anytime that you want. People don't leave because I think you have to create an environment where people want to be here. They're not a hostage to be here. And I think that's really what keeps everybody sharp. And we attract people like that. So we attract, there aren't too many people that you can think of, I certainly speak for me, that do not fit into this culture. They self-select out as they're looking at the business, quite frankly.
That's good.
It's just amazing. All right, so here's my purple squirrel question for you before we wrap up on culture. You said something earlier on And one of the second things that's always popping up is, do I have the skills? I don't have 100% of the skills necessary to become a franchisee with Sandler. So you said, I had no selling background. I was a purchasing agent. I crushed you as salespeople. And so one of the things that I hear is like, how important is it that I had sold for 10 years, or I managed for 10 years, or I was a trainer for 10 years? And I would just love your feedback, because I know, for instance, that all of us don't come in with the skills necessary to be a successful Sandler franchisee. Maybe you have a couple of them, but no one has the complete portfolio of things that you need experience-wise. And you learn it from your clients. You listen and you see the patterns. Next thing you know, you're regurgitating what you heard in class, and you feel like Kruskin. So I'd love your story or your thoughts on that, because it's easy for me to say, but you're a living testimonial on you were not a salesperson. Right? So you've obviously made it 6 years. You're way past the ramp up period of time. How did you learn to talk to owners, managers, salespeople when you were not one?
Yeah. Well, I faked it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's the best way to put that. I didn't have bad sales habits because I didn't have any habits. Mm-hmm. So I learned them from David Sandler video. I learned them from other people. Also, I looked around at other people and thought, after I figured out it was okay for me to be in the same room as the Sandler trainers, I looked at some other people and went, wait a minute, I can do that. Mm-hmm. I can probably do better than that. I don't know if it was true, but I chose to believe that. So I think part of my success, and we've had a great run this 6 years, is I didn't have bad habits. I didn't get creative. I have one creative thing I've done within Sandler, and really that was taking some other people's stuff and putting it in a different package. I knew that I have to do the behaviors because I've got some accountability people that pay attention. What I have seen, not often, well, certainly in our client base, those who have been salespeople for a long time, it's harder for them to adapt to be good Sandler salespeople with selling the Sandler way. The brand new ones, Dave, when we get brand new kids out of school or young people or people who haven't sold in the sales role, they nail it, and that's all they know. Yeah. So why would you sell any other way? Yeah. So I think you got to kind of surrender the old habits and just, as the old saying is, drink the Kool-Aid and just do it. Don't get creative, do it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you have to suspend and don't over exaggerate the imposter syndrome for a second. Just suspend this belief of I need it. Quite frankly, to your point, I did the same thing. I didn't have sales experience when I first came into Sandler, like you would traditionally say, and I used it to my advantage. Like I didn't have to undo 25 years of bad habits. But I do think after listening to prospects tell you their problems and clients just telling you the grind that they have as an owner, as a leader, as a salesperson every single day, you pick up those stories until they become your stories. And then you're talking first person. But I am almost regurgitating when I'm hearing all of the clients and people, Sandler trainers that I'm interacting with. The leaders guides have this stuff in there. So is there a period of time where you're a bit fish out of water sometimes on certain topics? Like, why am I teaching negotiating skills? Where I think it's one of those things, you jump in it and then you realize, oh, it's no big deal. But it's hard in the beginning because I always hear, I don't have 38 years of sales experience, or I didn't manage large sales forces. How am I going to teach sales management? But you realize that it's just jump in the pool, because the Sandler content is so strong. It will pull you forward, and the stories that you think you need for credibility will happen in the class. And then you'll take their stories until they become yours. And that's really what I wanted to make sure that the listeners heard, because you said it indirectly, but it's something that pops up all the time. And I just wanted to spend a couple minutes on it. All right, Cal, any last minute thoughts from you on any topic that we've talked about today?
We covered a lot, but your last one made me think of it. In our leaders in our management program, I've got a $600,000 company, and he's got a few people, and I've got a $100 million company. And that scared me a little bit, but there are about 8 or 9, I think, consistently, and a bunch in the middle. They all have the same stuff they want to talk about. Yeah, I'll bring a theme, they'll prep a little bit, and they've all got a challenge in there. So I guess from the beginning, what made it easier for me, I mean, it's not a picnic, but it's to make it easier was I did learn from my clients because they all have the same kinds of problems.
Right.
And in Sandler, we also learn to ask questions and to gather information. So if I do that, then they're doing the work for us, and that made it pretty easy. But
yeah, I think that Socratic method really does help you when it comes to that, for sure.
Yeah, I remember when I bought the business, there was no business when I bought this one, none, zero. And my wife wondered if I was a little crazy, and I said, well, here's the thing: weren't you afraid to go into a brand new with no business, no clients? This is what we teach people to do. So if we teach people to do it, we're learning it ourselves more and more. And we say this all the time: is this is one of the most unique businesses in that we teach and train our clients to do exactly what we do, and vice versa.
Yep.
And I think from all the franchises I've ever seen, this is the only one I have ever seen, there may be some, that actually has a sales culture.
Yeah.
The others have a product or a service culture, but they're not able to sell. And I've found through the number of franchise owners I know that they know how to use the systems, they know what the product is, they know all the features and benefits, but they do not have a sales culture, which is why they hire us to instill a sales culture. With Sandler, you're buying a sales culture, so you're out of the chute a lot faster. That's what worked for me.
Yeah, that's good. Good insight, and appreciate the advice that you've shared with others here today. Hey, I look forward to seeing you at the upcoming conference. And to those that are listening, I hope that in your due diligence, you find something that inspires you and that you want to spend the rest of your career doing. Until we talk to each other, hey, good selling. For more information on Sandler franchising opportunities, go to sandler.com/franchising. And don't forget to subscribe to the No Guts, No Gain podcast on your favorite app.